Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. Very fun and exciting video for you guys today. We are going to be taking a look at and trying out the new Natasha Denona Retro palette. You guys probably know, if you've been watching me for a while, that I'm a big fan of the Natasha Denona midi palettes, and I'm an even bigger fan of the mini Natasha Denona Retro palette. So when I saw this one released, you can probably guess how excited I was about this. I instantly went online and made sure that I could get this one here as quickly as possible. And today we are going to test it out together. Is it as good as the hype that it has been getting? This thing literally sold out before it was even available online, which seems crazy to me. Apparently I was not the only one that was excited about this palette, but we're going to take a look at it today. We're going to look at some swatches. We'll be doing 2 eye looks today. I want to do a lighter, more daytime friendly look, and then something a little bit deeper, more nighttime appropriate and smoky. And then towards the end of the video, after trying it out, I'm going to share with you guys my final thoughts, along with some potential criticisms I might have with the palette, because I do think, especially with these more expensive palettes, as excited as I might be about them, I like to really look at them critically and analyze, especially 2 questions. How unique is the palette? Do I own these shades already within my collection? And number 2, what would I personally have maybe liked to have seen to make the palette even a little bit better? I do already have some answers to both of those questions. We'll get into it at the end though. I am very excited to give this thing a try. Before we jump into the video, special welcome to any of you that are new here. I hope that you'll consider subscribing to my channel. Also make sure that notification bell is turned on if you'd like to be notified every time I upload a new video. And with all of that out of the way, let's get to it. Alright you guys, let's jump right into the palette. So here it is right here. I have to say I am such a fan of the outer packaging of this one. I love blush tone pinks. This is like, it's like the perfect nail color. The color and finish of this palette right here. Very soft, lovely pink. Here's what it looks like on the inside. There we go. Lots of berry tones in here. Some beautiful sparkly lid shades. We even get a matte cream or ivory, which I love. Also some really pretty deep shades, which I always love to see as well. So all in all, as far as the range from light to dark and also the finishes from matte to shimmer, you get all of that inside this palette, which I'm very happy to see. I will insert right here for you guys a closer look at the packaging as well as how the shadows look swatched on my arm. Hopefully that will give you guys a better idea of what the shades look like, how they compare to each other, and also what the finishes are like. It is stunning, I'm not gonna lie. When I first saw this palette released, my first initial thought was, that is what I wish the Natasha Denona Love palette would have been, at least for me personally. Now this is totally a personal preference thing, but you guys might know, if you've been watching me for a while, I often say that the Natasha Denona Love palette is definitely my least favorite of the mini palettes that she's come up with, simply for the fact that I'm not into really bold pinks and purples, and that palette is full of very bold pinks and purples. Those types of shades do intimidate me quite a bit. I prefer my pinks and purples to be a little bit more soft. I like more mauve tones, more berry tones, some lighter shimmers. That's just my own personal preference and what I'm comfortable with and what I think looks best on me. And this palette meets all of those criteria. Now I don't mean to compare this to the Natasha Denona Love palette. They definitely are not meant to be the same palettes, but I think my initially jumping the gun with that palette, I was kind of hoping those shades would look a little bit more like what I anticipate these will probably look like on me. I love that this palette has a lot of light or mid-tone shimmers. I love lid shades. You guys know how much I rely on those. So I'm very happy to see that as well. So I want to jump right into the looks that we're going to do, because we are going to do 2 different looks. I don't want this video to be terribly long. So I'm going to zoom you guys in. We'll get started with look number 1. Alright guys, so for the first look, I really am wanting to do something kind of taupey, a little bit lighter. This is more of a daytime look, so I'm really wanting to concentrate on this section right here, kind of the cooler tones right here, as well as this sort of taupey shimmer down here. So we're going to kick things off by going in with this light kind of dusty mauve. This is the shade Andy. And give that a little swatch on my finger for you guys. Just a really soft, light, almost pastel purple. Oh, that's beautiful. This actually reminds me of the color of my nail polish. Good job, Mandy, for success of the day. Okay, that is such a beautiful shade. Very cool tone. It's actually more cool tone on the eye, more lavender looking on the eye than it looks in the pan. I actually kind of like that. Then I'm going to use that same brush. We're going to go into that same shade just on the tip of the brush and run that under the lower lash line. Now I'm going to jump over to this smaller brush. This is the Rephr number 13 brush. I'm going to jump into that same shade. I'm just going to build up a tiny bit of depth with this shade right in my crease right there. Now I'm going to add a little bit of depth just to the lash line using same brush, the number 13, and this deep brown kind of almost looks like a charcoaly purple. This is the shade Apart. I'm going to add that just to the lash line. Now we're going to jump over to this kind of taupey silver mid-tone shimmer. This is the shade Jude. There it is right there. Ooh, such a pretty taupe. We're going to add this to the outer half of the lid. Just using my ring finger to tap that on. Now we're going to go down to this warmer, lighter shimmer. This is the shade Hello. That's what it looks like. We're going to use this one on the inner half of the lid, leaving the inner corner open. I'm going to put something else there. Back to my number 16 brush, we're just going to blend out those upper edges. Now we're going to add some brightness to the inner lid, inner corner. I'm going to take this very sparkly pink. It has a bit of a blue reflect in it. This is the shade Psychedelic. Super pretty. And I'm tapping that across the inner third of the lid. I'm going to take my Rephr number 3 brush. It's just a small pinpoint brush. We're going to take that same shimmery shade, Psychedelic, and I'm just going to add that to the tear duct. It's a little harder to do with your finger. You don't want that shimmer to get all over your under eye area. Okay, that looks lovely. I'm going to add a couple of coats of my Thrive Cosmetics mascara, then I'll be back with you guys and show you the finished look. Alright guys, here is the finished look. This is the lighter daytime look. Very happy with it. This is a beautiful look. It only took me a couple of minutes to create this. Very, very easy. Was very happy with all the shades that I tried. No issues with any of the formulas. The mattes were as good as ever. I love the different quality of her shimmers. Like that inner corner shade is much more sparkly and reflective, whereas the ones on the center of the lid are a little bit more satin type shimmers. And I always love that about her palettes. They have a variety of different shimmer finishes, which make for a variety of different looks. So hope you guys enjoy this finished look. We're going to go wash this one off. Then we're going to dip back into the palette for more of an evening look. We're going to do something a little bit deeper, a little bit more smoky, using some of those dark, rich berry tones. Alright guys, jumping back into the palette. This time I really want to focus in over on this section, these kind of warmer mauve shades right here, and then maybe deepen things up with these two. Maybe this one down here. This looks really nice and rich and deep. We'll just kind of jump in and see what we end up with. So let's start off in, actually this shade. Let's start off in this shade right here. This is the shade Nude Mauve. Really nice light transition shade. I'm just going to put a light amount of this up through the crease to kick things off. Now let's jump into this shade right here. This is kind of that warm pink. This looks to be her cream to powder formula. I'm not 100% sure on that. I actually haven't looked up the different finishes of the shade yet, but this is called Go Go. It's a really soft, kind of warm berry pink. I'm applying this one just a little bit lighter through my crease and then pulling it down and build that up a little bit. Now I want to take the Rephr number 2 brush, this little smudge brush, same shade, Go Go, and then go under the lower lash line. Now we're going to start layering up some depth in the outer corner, so we're going to go into this shade in the corner here. This is the shade Amara. Taking the number 13 brush, I'm going to jump over to this berry tone right here. This is the shade Groove. By the way, let me swatch those two shades next to each other. So this is the one that we put down first, and this is the one we're going to go in with right now. Starting in the outer corner and feathering it in and along the lash line. Alright, now with that same brush, we're going to dip into this shade down here, just for comparison on my fingers. There it is right here. So this one's actually not quite as deep, but it is her kind of cream to powder formula. And same area, but we're going to be a little bit more precise with This shade I do want to pull a little bit down underneath. And finally we're going to deepen up just along the lash line with the deep brown shade right there, the shade Apart. Nice and rich. Let's finish off with the lid shade. So we're going to start off with this shade right here. This is the shade Patty. There it is right there. Sorry, my fingers are a little bit stained. This one we're going to put on the outer half of the lid. I've wiped that finger off. We're going to run it along this inner edge here just to blend out that edge, and then we'll top it with something a little more sparkly. So let's go with this shade in the corner. This is a really pretty cool pink with a golden sparkle, almost a duochrome. I'm just running that on the inner third of the lid. Now to the other side. All right, now I'm gonna go back to my first brush, the number 16. Very lightly, I'm just gonna take that along the edge of that lighter shimmer just to blend those two out. And lastly, we're gonna dip into that deep brown with the number 2 brush. Again, that's the shade Apart. And I'm going to use this to just add a tiny bit more intensity along the lash line and clean up the shape right here. I'm going along the upper lash line and then along the lower. That completes the eye look. I'm going to add a couple of coats of my Thrive Cosmetics mascara, then I will zoom out, show you guys the finished look, and finish off with some final thoughts. Alright you guys, here we have the finished smoky / evening look. I am so happy with both of these looks. I think they turned out beautiful. And I'm really happy with everything that I've tried so far. I look forward to continuing to play with some of the other shades, the ones especially I haven't tried yet. Overall, I think it's a really beautiful palette and color story if you're into berry tones. If you're not into mauves and berries, I would just skip over this one altogether because it's definitely for the berry lover. I personally love those types of shades for me, but keep that in mind going into this palette or if you're considering this palette. Now, having used it so far, having looked at it and done all the swatches and just really analyzed this, as I like to do with these more expensive palettes, is this a palette that I think is unique within my collection? I'm gonna say no. Now, I don't think many palettes these days are because I've been collecting eyeshadow palettes for quite a while now, so it's really hard to get a truly unique palette. But as I've been analyzing this and using it, the 2 palettes I thought within my collection that immediately came to mind that kind of reminded me, at least of the color story of this palette, are 2 by ColourPop, and I'm gonna show them to you guys today compared to this palette, just in case you happen to own these and maybe you're on the fence about this palette, considering whether or not you need it within your collection or you want to spend the $65 on this one. So let me just show you these 2 right here. These are the Making Mauves and Blush Crush palette from ColourPop, 2 of my favorite ColourPop palettes. I love them both. Now, I don't want to say these are going to be complete dupes, but just looking at the color stories of these and with what I've used and having used these palettes a lot myself, I feel like you could probably get very, very similar, if not identical looks with these 2 as you could with this one right here. I'm not going to go through and swatch the comparisons for you guys today. Let me know if that's something you'd be interested in me doing. I just don't want this video to be too long, but I do think that there's going to be some similarities in the color stories of those palettes compared to this one right here. Now, individually, I don't think either of them could dupe this because this palette does have the side here that's a little bit warmer, more peachy pinks, and then this side that's more cooler berry tones. But if you do own both of these, maybe you're on a budget and you just really are tempted by this palette, but you don't want to spend your money on something that's not going to give you something unique in your collection. I really do think that these 2 palettes will likely give you very similar looks to the Natasha Denona Retro. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, my thoughts on this palette so far, I really enjoyed playing with it. I imagine I'm going to get a lot of use out of this one because I do love these types of tones so much. I do have a small criticism with this though, and again, this is just my personal opinion. I don't feel like this palette is a very strong nod to the retro palette, the original one. Now, I know you don't want to put the same shades inside the larger palette that are already inside the Natasha Denona Mini Retro, so here's the Mini Retro right here. But one of my favorite things about this smaller palette are these 2 kind of silvery greens right here. I would have loved to have seen something not identical, but something similar to these or a nod to these type of shades within the larger retro palette, and I also feel like that would have broken up, I don't necessarily want to say redundancy, but there are some shades in here like these 2 and these 2 that are similar enough that I think you could have just gone with one, and I would have loved to see like a silver or a green toned matte of some version that kind of mimicked the original retro. That's just my personal opinion. I think it would have added some fun variety to this one while still giving you all the peaches and pinks and mauve tones, but maybe having a splash of green in there I would have loved to see. You guys know I love my green eyeshadow. That's just a small criticism one for me personally. I love a palette that gives a ton of variety and versatility. This one I think gives you variety within mauve tones, but you only get pinks and mauves in here. And while they are beautiful, I would have loved to have just seen maybe 2 shades that were perhaps a shade lighter or darker than these 2 greens inside here, because I love them so very much. But that's just my opinion. Overall, I think it's a beautiful palette. I imagine it's gonna quickly climb up in the rankings of my Natasha Denona palettes. Not quite sure yet if it's gonna compete with the Glam palette or with the Sunrise palette. I think those are my 2 favorites from her. But I'm enjoying it so far. Love the looks that I came up with today, and I cannot wait to keep playing with it. Of course, I will keep you guys updated if my thoughts change or as I get to know it a little bit better. Keep an eye out for that in an upcoming video in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really hope it was helpful for you, especially if you're considering this palette or maybe on the fence about this one. Hopefully this will help you to make that decision. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Let me remind you one more time, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I would love for you to do that before you leave. And that's all I have for you guys today. See you in my next one. Bye. Kids, all my kids are home today. It's Labor Day. We have plans to go out and take the dirt bikes out at lunchtime today. So I told my kids, I need you guys to go outside while I finish this video today, not realizing that I sent them outside to ride their dirt bikes, and it was extremely noisy for about 20 minutes. Mom, always the destroyer of fun.